I spent years defending Tulsi Gabbard as if my own name were on the ballot. It wasn't just admiration, it was loyalty. I argued with strangers online until my fingers ached. I lost friends over it. Family dinners turned tense because I refused to stay quiet. When people called her a traitor, a puppet, or worse, something in me snapped. I felt like truth itself was under attack, and I had been chosen. Yes, chosen, to stand guard. I told myself I wasn't political. I was principled. I hated wars. I hated lies. I hated how power wrapped itself in flags and scriptures and called itself righteous. Tulsi, to me, was proof that integrity could still exist inside a rotten system. She didn't bow to party gods. She didn't chant the approved slogans. She spoke about peace when others salivated for blood. That mattered to me more than anything. Religion, on the other hand, repulsed me. Not spirituality. No, I believed in something. But religion? Churches? Kings? Thrones? I saw them as ancient control mechanisms, tools built to keep people obedient. I respected Tulsi because she questioned power. I rejected faith because it demanded surrender. I told people morality didn't need a god. That conscience was enough. The irony is, I never once questioned myself. The night everything changed, I wasn't angry or debating anyone. I was alone. Just me, my laptop glowing softly in the dark, replaying an interview where Tulsi spoke about truth and courage. I remember nodding along, thinking, this is what integrity looks like. I felt calm, certain, at peace with my convictions. Then my chest tightened. At first, I thought it was anxiety. I'd had panic attacks before. I stood up, paced the room, took shallow breaths. But this was different. This felt heavy, like someone had placed a stone slab inside my ribcage. My vision blurred. The room tilted. I tried to call out, but my voice didn't cooperate. I remember hitting the floor. I remember thinking, this is stupid. I'm not done yet. And then, something inside me slipped. There was no pain after that, just a sudden, terrifying clarity. The sounds of the room faded, like a radio being turned down slowly. My body felt distant, irrelevant. I knew, without anyone telling me, that I was dying. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, literally. And the strangest thought crossed my mind. If there is a God, I hope he keeps his distance. Because I had spent my entire life defending truth, and I had no intention of kneeling before a king I had ignored. I didn't float upward like people describe. There was no tunnel yet, no light, just a sudden awareness that my body was no longer where I was. One moment I was on the floor, the next I was beside it. Not above, not far, just slightly removed, like stepping half a pace out of alignment with reality. I could see myself collapsed, eyes half open, lips pale, chest barely moving. It should have terrified me. Instead, I felt detached, clinical, almost amused. So this is it, I thought. This is how it ends. No judgment, no angels, just biology failing. I remember feeling validated, as if death itself was proving my worldview correct. But then time did something strange. It stopped behaving. The room didn't freeze. It softened. The edges blurred, like reality was losing interest in staying solid. Sound disappeared entirely. Not silence, absence. And in that absence, I felt something else awaken. Not fear, not peace, awareness. A sharper version of consciousness than I'd ever known. My thoughts became instant, complete, undeniable. There was no hesitation anymore, no internal debate, just knowing. And with that knowing came a presence. Not in front of me, not behind me, around me. I didn't see anything at first, but I felt watched. Not the way a stranger watches you, but the way truth watches lies. Fully, penetratingly. As if every thought I'd ever had was suddenly exposed. Not judged, just seen. I wanted to turn away, but there was nowhere to turn. I wanted to argue, to explain myself, to justify everything I believed, but words were useless here. Explanations felt childish. My first instinct was defiance. I don't answer to you, I thought. I've lived ethically. I opposed war. I stood for truth. I defended the right people. If this is some kind of afterlife, I've earned my place. The presence did not respond. That was worse. Because in the absence of response, something else began to happen. Memories surfaced, not as images, but as experiences. I didn't just remember moments. I relived them. Conversations, dismissals, smug certainty. The way I rolled my eyes at faith. The way I reduced belief to ignorance. The way I assumed intelligence exempted me from humility. I felt the weight of every time I believed I was right simply because I stood alone. And then, without warning, the space around me changed. The room vanished. The floor vanished. My body vanished. I was no longer somewhere. I was suspended in a vast, dim expanse, not dark, not light, neutral, endless. And at the center of this expanse was a stillness so profound it felt alive. I knew, with a certainty deeper than logic, that I had crossed a boundary, not between life and death, but between opinion and reality. That's when I sensed him. Not as an image, not as a voice, as authority, not the kind that demands obedience, the kind that makes rebellion feel irrelevant. I wanted to look away. I wanted to cling to my arguments, my principles, my carefully constructed identity. But none of it mattered here. Every defense I'd ever used felt paper thin. Every moral stance I'd taken suddenly looked incomplete, not wrong, but unfinished. And for the first time in my life, a thought entered me that I had never allowed before. What if truth is not something I defend, but someone I've been avoiding? That was the moment fear finally arrived. Because I realized I wasn't about to meet an idea. I was about to face a king. I didn't see him arrive. There was no movement, no announcement, no shift in the space itself. One moment I was alone with that crushing awareness, and the next I understood. He was there. Not entering, not approaching, simply present, as if he had always been, and I was the one who had finally become capable of noticing. And then I saw him. Not the way eyes see, but the way the soul recognizes what it was made to recognize. There was no crown, no throne, no spectacle. Yet everything about him radiated kingship, authority without force, power without threat. He didn't dominate the space, he defined it. The vastness around us seemed to draw meaning from him, like light borrowing its brightness from a source. I wanted to speak. I needed to speak. Years of arguments surged forward, ready to deploy. I had questions, objections, carefully rehearsed critiques of religion, of divine authority, of worship itself. I had defended peace, challenged empires, rejected blind obedience. Surely that counted for something. But the moment I tried to form a thought, it fell apart. Not because he silenced me, but because in his presence, my arguments felt small, not stupid, not evil, just incomplete, like trying to explain the ocean with a glass of water. I realized, with a shock that pierced deeper than fear, that everything I had defended was downstream from something I had never acknowledged. Truth did not originate with me. He looked at me. I don't know how I know that, because there were no visible eyes the way I expected. But I was seen, entirely. Every motive, every rationalization. every moment where I chose being right over being humble. And yet, there was no accusation in that gaze, no disappointment, just clarity, a clarity that stripped me bare without shaming me. And then he spoke, not with sound, with understanding. You defended what you could see, the knowing said, but you rejected what you could not control. That sentence broke something inside me. I felt every time I had dismissed faith as weakness, every time I equated surrender with stupidity, every time I believed moral courage meant standing alone, even when alone meant refusing to kneel. I saw how often my pride wore the costume of principle, how often my certainty protected me from having to trust. I tried to respond, to explain that I had opposed violence, that I had stood for peace, that I had defended the marginalized, that I had fought corruption, and the response came instantly, gentle and devastating. You admired the fruits, but refused the root. In that moment, something unfolded around us, not as images, but as understanding. I saw how truth flows, how peace is not just the absence of war, but alignment with love, how justice without humility hardens into self-righteousness, how conscience, when severed from its source, eventually bends to the self. And then I understood something that terrified me. He was not offended by my disbelief. He had been waiting for my honesty. The fear returned, not of punishment, but of exposure. Because standing before him, I realized I had never truly asked the question that mattered. I had debated endlessly, defended endlessly. But I had never said, if you are real, show me who you are. Tears, not physical, but something deeper, rose within me. And for the first time, I did not defend myself. I simply stood there, stripped of arguments, stripped of certainty, stripped of pride. And that's when he showed me what my life had actually been shaping me for. I expected judgment, some sentence, some verdict, some eternal consequence delivered like a gavel striking stone. I had spent my life assuming that if God existed, he ruled through fear and reward, heaven as a bribe, hell as a threat. Standing there, exposed and silent, I braced myself for that moment. It never came. Instead, he showed me, not visions of fire or torment, but a widening awareness of what my life had been doing beneath the surface. I saw paths branching endlessly from every choice I'd made. Conversations that could have gone deeper, but didn't. Moments where curiosity could have replaced contempt. Invitations I never noticed because I was too busy being certain. I saw how often I mistook resistance for courage. He didn't accuse me of rejecting him. He showed me how often I had walked past him without looking, because he didn't arrive wearing power the way I expected. I wanted truth to look like defiance, like sharp words, like public bravery. I never considered that truth might arrive quietly, asking for trust instead of applause. Then came the hardest realization. I had defended peace fiercely, but only as an idea. I opposed war, yes, but I still waged battles in my heart. Against believers, against tradition, against the very idea of surrender. I saw how often I dismissed people not because they were wrong, but because they believed in something I refused to kneel before. My intellect had become a gatekeeper, my pride a fortress, and he let me feel it, not guilt, clarity. I felt the weight of living near truth without entering it, of circling the king while refusing to acknowledge his crown, of protecting morality while refusing relationship. It wasn't sin that crushed me, it was proximity. I had been so close, so aligned in values, yet still distant. That's when I understood something devastating. Hell is not a place he sends people. It is a distance people choose. And suddenly, I felt it, that distance. Not separation from him, but the possibility of it. A cold awareness of what it would mean to exist forever, clutching my independence, my pride, my certainty, while standing inches from the source of everything I claimed to love. I realized then why he hadn't argued with me. Truth doesn't debate. It invites. And I had spent my entire life declining the invitation because it didn't come on my terms. My resistance finally broke, not in fear, in grief. I felt something collapse inside me, not my principles, not my ethics, but my illusion of self-sufficiency. I understood that everything I admired in courage, restraint, peace, and conscience had not originated in human brilliance. They flowed from him, whether I acknowledged it or not. And for the first time, I asked, not defensively, not challengingly, but honestly, is it too late? The answer came instantly, wrapped in a gentleness that shattered me. You are here because it is not. And then he did something I never expected. He gave me a choice. I thought the choice would be obvious. Stay or go. Light or darkness. Heaven or whatever waited beyond distance. That's how stories frame it. That's how I always mocked them. Too simple, too theatrical. But what he offered me wasn't dramatic at all. It was quiet, personal, heavy. He showed me two truths at once. In one, I remained there, not as a reward, not as an escape, but as rest. A stillness where nothing needed proving, where truth was no longer defended but breathed, where I would finally stop arguing and start being. I felt how easy it would be to let go, how natural surrender felt when pride was no longer necessary. And then he showed me the other truth. Life. Not my life as it had been, but as it could be. I saw myself waking up with this memory burning inside me, unable to forget it, unable to soften it for others. I saw the cost of returning, ridicule, disbelief, the slow erosion of certainty. I saw friends look at me differently. I saw the temptation to stay silent, to file this experience away as a hallucination, to protect my reputation. I saw how lonely truth can be when it no longer flatters the ego. That's when fear truly arrived. Not fear of him. Fear of what it would mean to live without hiding behind intellect anymore. I realized something then, something deeply uncomfortable. Defending Tulsi had been easy compared to this, standing for a politician, a cause, an idea that had given me structure, language, allies. This was different. This would strip me of slogans. This would leave me exposed, changed, accountable. I asked him why he would even give me a choice. The understanding came gently, unmistakably. Love that is forced is not love. That broke me. I had accused faith of being authoritarian my whole life. And here stood the ultimate authority, refusing to coerce me. No threats, no ultimatums, just truth, offered freely, knowing I might still walk away. I realized then how many times I had misunderstood him. I thought kings demanded submission to feed their power. But his power didn't need feeding. My submission wouldn't increase him. It would heal me. I felt something else too. Time. Not urgency, but awareness that my body was still there. Still struggling. Still tethered to breath. I knew I couldn't linger forever. The choice wasn't about deserving. It was about willingness. I looked at him, not with arguments this time, but with honesty. I don't know how to live this, I admitted. I don't know how to believe without turning it into pride again. The response came immediately. You won't do it alone. That was when I understood the real cost. Returning meant responsibility, Staying meant rest, and I wanted both. But only one was love. I made my choice, not because I was brave, but because I finally stopped defending myself. And the moment I did, everything began to pull away. The stillness faded. The vastness folded inward. The awareness narrowed. The peace didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip, like hands releasing something precious. The last thing I felt before leaving was not fear. It was reluctance, because for the first time in my life, I was walking away from certainty, not toward it. The return was violent. Not dramatic, violent. Awareness slammed back into me like a door kicked open. Pain rushed in first, sharp and immediate, as if my body was angry I had left it behind. My chest burned. My lungs convulsed, dragging air in like they didn't trust it would stay. Sound came back distorted, muffled voices, panicked movement, someone shouting my name as if from underwater. I wanted to scream, "I'm here," but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. My body felt foreign, heavy, crude, limited. After that clarity, this felt like being stuffed into a cage. I remember gasping, coughing, choking on air that suddenly felt too thick. Hands pressed against me, grounding, restraining, anchoring me back into flesh. Someone said I was lucky. Someone else said I'd flatlined. The words barely registered. All I could think was, I didn't want to leave. That realization shocked me more than the pain. I had fought my whole life to stay independent, unconstrained, unsurrendered, and now the thought of being back inside myself felt like exile. I closed my eyes, hoping, absurdly, that I might slip back, that maybe I could undo the choice. But the pull was gone. The stillness had released me, and life had reclaimed its property. Hours later, or maybe minutes, time was unreliable. I lay alone in a hospital bed, machines humming softly like indifferent witnesses. The room was dim, the walls blank, my body exhausted, and my mind on fire. I replayed everything, not doubting it, reliving it. The presence, the clarity, the king, the invitation, the choice. It didn't feel like a dream fading with daylight. It felt embedded, permanent, like a truth etched into bone. And then came the terror. Not of death, of living. Because I realized something brutal. I could never go back to being who I was. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. I couldn't reduce him to myth or metaphor without lying to myself. And yet, I also knew how unbelievable this would sound. I imagined the looks, the polite nods, the quiet assumptions. She had a near-death hallucination. Her brain misfired. This is how people cope. I had used those explanations myself. I turned my head and stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. Not from pain, but from responsibility. I understood now why he had warned me without words. Returning wasn't a reward, it was a burden. Not because the truth was heavy, but because carrying it would cost me comfort. For the first time, I felt the urge to stay silent, to keep this between me and him, to live quietly ethical, quietly changed, quietly safe. And in that moment, I felt something familiar, something I recognized with sudden clarity. Pride. Not loud pride, not arrogant pride. The subtle kind. The kind that says, I'll decide how much truth I reveal. I'll control how this changes me. The same instinct that had shaped my life before, just wearing a new mask. I closed my eyes and whispered, not out loud, but inwardly, I don't know how to do this. There was no vision, no voice, but there was a knowing. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be honest. Tears came then, real ones this time. Hot, uncontrollable, humiliating. I cried not because I was scared of dying again, but because I understood how much dying had stripped away and how much living would demand. Survival, I realized, was the easy part. Now came the harder task. Living without hiding. I thought recovery meant my body healing. That's what everyone else focused on. Heart rate, scans, medications, follow-ups. They called it a close call, a medical scare, a reminder to slow down. I nodded along, played my part, thanked doctors, reassured family. I learned quickly how easy it was to speak without saying anything true. Inside, nothing had gone back to normal. The world felt thinner. Not fake, just less solid. Conversations skimmed the surface of things that suddenly felt urgent to me. People argued with the same confidence I once had, and I could see the shape of their certainty, the way you see cracks in glass once you know they're there. I didn't feel superior. I felt exposed, like I had lost a protective layer everyone else still wore. I opened my laptop one evening, out of habit, and scrolled through old arguments. Old posts. Old defenses. I saw myself in those words, sharp, articulate, absolutely convinced. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger or embarrassment. I felt grief. Not because I had been wrong about everything, but because I had been incomplete and didn't know it. I saw how much energy I had poured into defending ideas while avoiding relationship. How safe it was to argue about truth instead of standing inside it. I hadn't been dishonest. I had been careful, and careful had kept me from ever needing to kneel. The strangest part was how quiet God felt now. Not absent, quiet, no visions, no voice, no dramatic signs, just a steady awareness that he was no longer something I could debate. He was someone I now had to respond to with my life. That terrified me more than the encounter itself. In that vast stillness, surrender had been easy. Here, surrounded by noise and expectations and habits, surrender required intention. I tested myself. I tried to pray, awkwardly, cautiously, without language that felt borrowed or performative. The words didn't flow. I didn't feel anything dramatic. But I noticed something subtle. I wasn't talking at the ceiling. I was listening, and that alone changed everything. I stopped arguing online. Not because I was afraid, but because the hunger to win had disappeared. Victory felt hollow now. I saw how often debate was just a way to avoid vulnerability. I didn't want to dismantle people anymore. I wanted to understand them. That scared me too. Understanding requires patience, and patience doesn't make you look strong. Friends noticed the change. They asked if I was okay, if something had happened. I gave vague answers. Health stuff. Perspective shift. The truth hovered in my throat every time, but I couldn't force it out. Not yet. I remembered what he had shown me. Returning would be lonely. Truth doesn't announce itself. It waits to be asked for. One night, alone again, I felt the old instinct rise, the urge to compartmentalize, to turn the experience into something manageable, a metaphor, a psychological event, anything that let me keep control. And that's when I realized something unsettling. I could still walk away. Not from him. He wasn't going anywhere, but from responding. I could live a decent, ethical, respectable life and never speak his name. Never kneel. Never risk being misunderstood. The door wasn't slammed shut behind me. It was standing open. And standing in that doorway, I understood the final test hadn't happened during death. It was happening now. In ordinary life. In whether I would let what I saw actually change me, or whether I would slowly edit it down until it fit comfortably back inside my old identity. I sat there in the quiet, heart heavy, knowing something irreversible was being asked of me. Not belief, witness. I didn't plan the moment. That's important. If I had planned it, I might have talked myself out of it. I was sitting with someone I trusted, not debating, not arguing, just listening. They were talking about politics, faith, certainty, the same old lines, the same confidence I used to wear so comfortably. And suddenly, I realized my silence wasn't humility anymore. It was fear. My heart started racing the same way it had that night. Not physically, spiritually. I felt that familiar pull, that quiet pressure I had come to recognize. Not a command, an invitation. The same one I had declined my whole life. So I spoke, not dramatically, not loudly. I didn't say, I saw heaven, or I met God, like a headline begging to be mocked. I said something smaller and much harder. I died, I told them, and I came back different. They looked at me, waiting for a punchline. None came. I told them I had spent my life defending truth while avoiding surrender. That I had admired courage, but confused humility for weakness. That I had rejected kings because I didn't want to kneel, even to the one who didn't demand it. I didn't preach. I didn't argue. I just testified. Plain, unpolished, exposed. Something shifted in the room. Not belief, attention. I understood then what he had been teaching me all along. He didn't send me back to win debates. He sent me back because witnesses don't argue. They point. They say, I was there. This is what I saw. Do with it what you will. Some people pulled away after that. Others leaned in. A few grew uncomfortable. I lost a version of myself that day. The sharp one, the untouchable one, the one who always had the upper hand. And I won't pretend that loss didn't hurt, but something else took its place. Peace. Not the kind that silences questions, but the kind that survives them. I still respect Tulsi. I still value courage and restraint and conscience. But now I see them differently. They were never rivals to faith. They were signposts pointing towards something I had refused to face. I had defended the fruit fiercely, never once asking where it came from. Now I know. The king I ignored never chased me. He waited. He let me build my arguments. He let me sharpen my intellect. He let me stand alone until standing alone was no longer enough. And when my heart finally stopped, when all my defenses collapsed, he didn't condemn me. He revealed himself, and he let me leave, not because I was finished, but because I wasn't. I understand it now. He doesn't need defenders. He needs witnesses who have been undone by truth and rebuilt by love. I used to think kneeling meant losing myself. I was wrong. Kneeling is how I finally stopped pretending I was my own king. And living with that truth, that is the hardest, holiest work I have ever been given.